Gol D. Roger's laugh has always been treated like a punchline, a strange reaction at the end of the world, a legendary pirate reaching the final island, seeing the greatest treasure ever left behind, and laughing like it was all some kind of joke. But what if that laugh wasn't humor at all? What if it were recognition? Not amusement, but inevitability. Because Roger didn't laugh because the One Piece was funny. He laughed because, in that moment, he realized the truth could not be claimed, stolen, or rushed. It could only arrive when the world itself was ready. That laugh wasn't joy. It was the sound of a man understanding that he had reached the end of a journey and still arrived too early. The Pirate King didn't fail to obtain the treasure. The era itself failed to meet the conditions required to receive it. That realization changes everything we think we know about Laughtale. Because if Roger could reach it and still be too early, then Laughtale cannot be just a physical location waiting patiently on the map. It isn't an island you stumble upon by sailing far enough or fighting hard enough. Laughtale behaves less like land and more like an event. A convergence point where history, time, and will intersect. A place that exists only under very specific conditions and vanishes when those conditions are not met. That's why the Road Poneglyphs don't behave like normal directions. They don't simply tell you where to go. They quietly imply when you're allowed to arrive. And that's why the final island has never been conquered, occupied, or erased. You can't destroy something that refuses to exist on your schedule. This is where the idea becomes unsettling. If Laughtale is a moment in history rather than a fixed destination, then it raises a terrifying possibility. What if the island doesn't appear at all unless the world itself has reached a breaking point? What if the One Piece can only be revealed when enough people are ready to hear the truth it contains? That would explain why Roger laughed instead of claiming it. Why did he choose death instead of silence? Why did he ignite a global era of piracy instead of hiding what he learned? Because if Laughtale is the final chapter of the world's true history, then forcing it open early would only repeat the same collapse that erased the Void Century in the first place. The treasure doesn't test strength, it tests maturity. And the world, for 800 years, has repeatedly failed that test. And that's where the world government enters the picture. Not as ignorant rulers scrambling to hide a secret, but as custodians of delay. If Laughtale only appears when the world is ready, then the most effective way to stop it isn't to destroy it. It's to slow everything down. Control history. Rewrite narratives. Fragmented nations. Suppress inherited will. Stretch time until generations forget what they're even missing. The Void Century wasn't erased to hide the past. It was erased to prevent the future. Because as long as humanity remains divided, fearful, and obedient, the conditions for Laughtale's return can never fully align. Roger didn't laugh because he won. He laughed because he saw the finish line and understood that someone else would have to cross it. But to understand how that moment was engineered, how an island learned to wait, we first need to understand what Laughtale really is. The biggest mistake the world makes about Laughtale is assuming it behaves like a normal island. Every map, every theory, every reckless pirate who set sail, believing they could brute force their way to the final destination, fell into the same trap, thinking Laughtale sits somewhere, patiently waiting to be discovered. but the story itself has been quietly telling us the opposite for decades. No eternal pose has ever pointed to it, no log pose has ever locked on to it, and no empire, not even the world government at the height of its power, has ever occupied it. That alone should tell us something is wrong with the assumption. Laughtale doesn't obey the rules of geography because it was never meant to be found through geography alone. It exists outside the logic of normal exploration, and that's why the world keeps searching in the wrong places. Instead of asking where Laughtale is, the better question is how it moves. The Grand Line is already an artificial nightmare. Magnetic chaos, unpredictable weather, currents that defy reason. That level of instability doesn't occur naturally across an entire planet without intervention. The seas themselves behave as if they were programmed, not formed. Islands appear isolated yet connected by invisible systems beneath the surface, like nodes in a massive machine. If Laughtale is hidden within that system, then it wouldn't need to remain stationary. It could drift, sink, re-emerge, or become unreachable simply by aligning itself with currents no ship can follow unless everything else lines up perfectly. In that framework, Laughtale isn't missing. It's phasing in and out of accessibility, synchronized with the world's most extreme oceanic forces. This is where the Grand Line stops looking like a natural sea route and starts looking like a containment system. Reverse Mountain doesn't guide ships forward, it filters them. Calm belts don't exist to isolate the Grand Line, they imprison it. The Red Line doesn't divide the world by coincidence, it locks it into place. When you view the planet from that perspective, it becomes disturbingly clear that the seas were reshaped to protect something, or delay something. Laughtale fits perfectly into that design. A final island hidden not behind distance, but behind complexity. Behind systems layered on top of systems, all designed to reject anyone who isn't following the correct path at the correct time. That would explain why even the most powerful fleets in history never stumbled upon it by accident. You can't invade a place that refuses to stay put. At the center of this moving world is a mechanism most people overlook because it isn't named outright: the Dragon Stream. A planet-spanning ocean current so vast it takes thousands of years to complete a full cycle, quietly dragging islands, creatures, and even history along with it. If Laughtale is anchored to this stream, then its appearance wouldn't be random. It would be scheduled, timed to celestial shifts, underwater eruptions, and pressure systems far below the surface where no map can reach. That means the Road Poneglyphs were never meant to point at a fixed destination. They were designed to track a moving one, and that's where everything changes. Because once Laughtale is understood as part of a global cycle, the final journey stops being about navigation and starts becoming about timing. For years, the Road Poneglyphs have been treated like the ultimate treasure map. 4 ancient stones that, when combined, reveal a single location on the world's surface. That interpretation feels logical, clean, and comfortable. Which is exactly why it's wrong. Because if the Road Poneglyphs truly pointed to a fixed place, then the mystery of Laughtale would have ended the moment Roger completed the set. Yet, even after reaching the destination, Roger declared himself too early, not lost, not mistaken, early. That word doesn't belong in geography. You can be lost at sea. You can misread a map. But you cannot arrive early to a place unless that place is tied to time. The Road Poneglyphs were never simple coordinates. They were instructions for synchronization. Each Road Poneglyph contains more than a location. It contains a condition. Individually, they're useless. Together, they don't form an X on a map so much as a convergence point between multiple systems. Ocean currents, magnetic fields, celestial movement, pressure cycles beneath the sea. When those factors align, Laughtale becomes accessible. When they don't, it might as well not exist. This reframes the entire journey. The final island isn't hidden behind strength or luck. It's hidden behind patience, behind cycles that take centuries to complete. That's why no single generation can brute force its way there. You don't conquer Laughtale. You wait for it. This is why Roger's journey ends in laughter instead of triumph. He did everything right, gathered the stones, followed the currents, reached the end of the world. But one critical element was missing: alignment. The world itself hadn't reached the moment Joy Boy had prepared for. The ancient kingdom's plan wasn't designed to be completed by just anyone who arrived. It required the right era, the right voices, the right wills are converging at once. Roger saw the blueprint, understood the purpose, and realized the final act required players who hadn't even been born yet. That kind of realization doesn't make a man angry. It makes him laugh at the absurdity of arriving at destiny before destiny is ready to meet you. Once you accept that idea, the Road Poneglyphs transform from directions into a clock. 4 markers tracking the slow rotation of the world itself. Celestial bodies moving overhead. Ocean currents are shifting below. Magnetic chaos stabilizing just long enough to open a path. Miss one of those variables, and Laughtale doesn't hide. It simply fails to manifest. Ships sail through empty waters where an island should be. Log poses spin uselessly. Eternal poses refuse to lock on. From the outside, it looks like failure. From the system's perspective, it's working perfectly. The island is there only when all conditions are satisfied. Otherwise, it's functionally invisible. That raises a far more unsettling question than where Laughtale is. It forces us to ask how often it even appears at all. If the Road Poneglyphs measure cycles instead of distance, then Laughtale might only surface during rare windows, moments so brief that missing them means waiting generations for another chance. That would explain why the world government fears the stones more than any weapon. Not because they reveal a place, but because they reveal timing. They announce that history is moving forward again. And once the clock completes its cycle, no amount of force, censorship, or control can stop what comes next. Because when the world reaches that moment, Laughtale doesn't wait to be found. It arrives. To understand how the world hides something as massive as Laughtale, you have to stop thinking in terms of islands and start thinking in terms of systems. Not routes, not seas, but planetary circulation. Deep beneath the chaos of the Grand Line exists a current so vast and slow-moving that it doesn't behave like normal water at all. It functions more like a conveyor belt wrapped around the globe. This is the Dragon Stream, a planet-spanning ocean current that quietly dictates where islands surface, where creatures migrate, and when certain paths become accessible. Unlike surface currents that shift with the weather, this one operates on a scale measured in centuries. It doesn't rush. It waits, and in doing so, it controls the rhythm of the world itself. The dragon stream completes a full cycle roughly once every 2,000 years, dragging everything tethered to it along a predetermined path. But within that massive loop are narrow windows, moments when pressure changes, tectonic movement, and magnetic alignment briefly open routes that are otherwise sealed. These access windows don't last long. Miss one, and the current locks back into place, making entire regions unreachable again. This is how a moving island like Laughtale can exist without being discovered. It isn't constantly hidden, it's selectively available. And that selectivity ensures that only those who understand the world's deeper mechanics and arrive at the correct moment can even perceive it. Everyone else sails through empty seas, convinced the island is a myth. What makes this system even more convincing is how perfectly it explains the Grand Line's most violent anomalies. Underwater volcanoes that erupt without warning, whirlpools that appear fully formed and vanish just as quickly, downward plumes that drag ships straight into the depths as if the ocean itself is swallowing them. These aren't random disasters. They're pressure release points, valves in a global circulation system managing energy on a planetary scale. When the dragon stream shifts, the world reacts. Seas churn, magnetic fields destabilize, and for brief moments, paths that shouldn't exist suddenly open. That's not chaos, that's design. And design implies intention. If the seas were reshaped intentionally, then the world was never meant to be free in the way people assume. The red line becomes less of a natural landmass and more of a structural brace. The calm belts act as barriers, preventing uncontrolled movement. Reverse mountain funnels traffic into a single direction, ensuring that every journey through the Grand Line follows a controlled path. Seen together, the planet starts to resemble a locked mechanism, one designed to delay access to something at its core. Laughtale fits into this system perfectly, riding the dragon stream like a hidden gear, only aligning with the surface when the cycle permits it. And if that's true, then the oceans aren't just hiding history. They're enforcing it. That realization leads to a chilling conclusion. If the seas were engineered, then everything living within them exists inside that design as well. Migration patterns aren't accidents. Unusual creatures aren't coincidences. The world's oceans aren't just water. They're a filter, a test. And if something as monumental as Laughtale depends on that system, then the beings capable of navigating it were never random either. Because in a world this carefully constructed, nothing that survives at the deepest levels does so by chance. From the very beginning, One Piece has quietly placed whales at the edges of the world, massive, ancient creatures positioned not as background life, but as sentinels. They appear at thresholds, at Reverse Mountain, near critical routes, at places where journeys begin or where something important is meant to be remembered. And yet, for most of the story, they're treated as emotional set pieces rather than functional ones. Gentle giants, tragic symbols, living scenery. But that interpretation ignores a deeper pattern. Island whales are never random. They don't wander aimlessly. They move with purpose, following paths that don't align with conventional navigation. In a world governed by shifting currents and hidden cycles, whales don't just live in the ocean, they read it. They are living instruments, attuned to movements far beneath the surface, responding to signals ships and humans cannot detect. Laboon is the clearest example, but he's far from the only one. Laboon doesn't just wait, he remembers. Decades pass, and he never forgets the promise carved into his body. That alone defies normal animal instinct. But more importantly, Laboon positions himself at Reverse Mountain, one of the most artificial, controlled gateways in the entire world. That isn't coincidence. Reverse Mountain funnels all Grand Line traffic into a single path, and Laboon sits directly in that flow, listening, watching, waiting. His behavior mirrors something closer to a lighthouse than an animal. And when you look at other island whales scattered across the world, the pattern becomes clearer. They gather near critical currents, near underwater anomalies, near places where the ocean behaves strangely, as if they're tracking something passing through. What separates whales from humans isn't intelligence, it's perception. Whales communicate through frequencies that travel vast distances underwater, bending around terrain, passing through pressure zones humans can't survive in. In the one-piece world where sound, voice, and will carry supernatural weight, that matters. It suggests whales aren't just hearing noise, they're sensing movement at a planetary scale. Something deep, something slow, something ancient. If the dragon stream is a global current controlling the world's rhythm, then whales may be biologically tuned to it. They migrate not based on seasons, but on shifts in pressure and alignment that occur over centuries. That would explain why they appear where they do, and why they seem to wait for things rather than chase them. They aren't searching, they're synchronizing. This is where the voice of all things stops being a vague ability and starts becoming essential. Characters who can hear it don't just understand animals, they perceive the world's hidden signals. They hear echoes of the past, warnings, invitations, instructions embedded into reality itself. When Roger reached Laughtale, he didn't just read history, he heard it. When Luffy connects with creatures like Laboon, Sea Kings, or Zunesha, it isn't dominance, it's resonance. The whales likely respond to the same signal that governs Laughtale's movement, a planetary voice transmitted through currents, pressure, and time. A voice humans evolved to ignore. That's why whales can act as navigational markers without knowing where they're going. They don't need maps. They follow the call. And yet, this introduces a disturbing contradiction. Because if whales can hear the world's deepest signals, and some humans can hear the voice of all things, then why can't everyone who hears it reach Laughtale? Why does the ability to listen not guarantee access? That question leads directly to the most unsettling figure in the story. Someone who sees everything, controls everything, and likely hears far more than anyone realizes. Because there is one being at the top of the world who understands the system, knows the cycles, and may even recognize the call of Laughtale itself, and still cannot go there. For someone who sits at the absolute center of power, Emu is defined by absence. No footsteps in history, no confirmed face, no legacy celebrated or remembered. And yet, wherever Emu's influence spreads, something else follows. Decay. Entire kingdoms erased, names wiped from existence, landscapes reduced to scars. There is a quiet sickness surrounding Emu, not always literal, but systemic. Cultures rot, truth withers, history collapses into fragments. This isn't the kind of destruction Blackbeard causes with violence or chaos. It's slower, cleaner, more controlled. Emu doesn't burn the world down. Emu starves it. And that distinction matters, because it suggests Emu's power isn't just political. It's fundamentally opposed to growth, memory, and freedom. That opposition explains something that otherwise makes no sense. If Emu rules the world, controls the seas, commands the strongest military force in history, and has erased entire eras without consequence, then why hasn't Laughtale been eliminated? Why not invade it, occupy it, or destroy it outright? The answer may be unsettlingly simple. Laughtale doesn't hide from Emu. It rejects Emu, not as an enemy, but as an incompatible presence. The island doesn't need walls or armies. It enforces a rule far more absolute. Control cannot enter. Laughtale isn't protected by secrecy alone. It's protected by principle. And that principle appears to operate on a level deeper than politics or power. This is where Emu stops being a villain of ambition and starts looking like a biological contradiction. Everything about Emu's rule is artificial. Extended lifespan, preserved authority, frozen hierarchy. Nothing moves unless Emu allows it. Nothing grows unless it can be controlled. That kind of existence may be sustainable in a throne room, but it clashes violently with something like Laughtale, which only appears when the world is moving forward. If Laughtale is tied to cycles, growth, and release, then someone who exists outside of time, or worse, someone who actively suppresses time, would be unable to approach it, not barred by force, but by nature, like a body rejecting a foreign organ. Emu doesn't lack power. Emu lacks compatibility. That incompatibility suggests something even more disturbing. Laughtale is not neutral. It chooses, not consciously, but structurally. It manifests only when certain conditions are met, and one of those conditions may be the absence of absolute control. A world locked under Emu's thumb can never fully open the path. That's why the world government doesn't rush to find Laughtale. It delays, fragments, and distracts. Because as long as history remains broken and people remain divided, the island's rules can't be satisfied. And that brings us to the ultimate irony. The one man who reached Laughtale didn't do so by ruling the world, but by letting go of it. Which brings us to the only person who ever broke that rule. The man who stood at the edge of truth and laughed. For generations, Joy Boy has been elevated into myth, a figure of grandeur, a man who once promised the world salvation, whose name alone sparks legends of freedom and hope. Pirates whisper it, scholars debate it, and yet, when we examine the fragments of history carefully, a much darker, quieter truth emerges. Joy Boy wasn't a hero. He wasn't a savior, a liberator, or even a figure who achieved his goals. He was a man burdened by ambition and bound by promises he could not keep. The grandeur attached to his name is a cloak over failure, a story rewritten by centuries who wanted hope, not honesty. He lived in an era where the very structures of civilization were fragile, where the ancient kingdom was falling apart, and where even the most well-intentioned efforts could collapse under forces far beyond human control. The burden of a broken promise, of a world left unstable, is what shaped the lives of those who followed, coloring their destinies with the shadow of someone else's mistakes. This inherited guilt is subtle, but it is transformative. Unlike a weapon or a piece of knowledge, guilt travels silently, invisibly, embedding itself in the decisions, the sacrifices, and the struggles of those who succeed where Joy Boy failed. It teaches restraint, forces reflection, and amplifies the stakes of every choice. Roger, Luffy, and even the scattered heroes of the current age are haunted not just by their own ambitions, but by the lingering echoes of a promise unfulfilled. Joy Boy's story does not end with him. His failure became a ghost, moving forward in time, shaping eras, influencing generations. That ghost doesn't disappear. It doesn't fade. It travels. And as we follow the path from the past to the present, we begin to see that the world of One Piece is haunted less by the men who ruled it and more by the men who once failed it. That guilt didn't vanish with the Void Century. It learned how to travel. For decades, the will of D has been whispered about as if it were simply a family trait, a genetic quirk passed down from parent to child. It's easy to see why. The name pops up in prominent bloodlines, carried by individuals who seem fated for greatness or chaos. But the truth is far stranger and far more dangerous than a simple hereditary marker. The will of D is not a gene. It cannot be isolated, traced, or replicated through biology. It's a force that moves through people, across generations, a current of intent and defiance that infects those who are capable of understanding it. Unlike inherited traits, it is not about who you are born to. It is about who you become, and how deeply you can internalize the legacy of rebellion against oppression. That's why the world government has always feared it. It cannot be predicted, controlled, or eradicated with a sword or decree. It is transmitted in whispers, in choices, in the courage to laugh at a world that demands obedience. Unlike a bloodline, the will of D spreads mimetically. It travels through stories, actions, and emotional resonance. Those who carry it do not need formal education or official recognition. They inherit conviction. When Roger laughed atop the execution platform, he was not simply performing an act of bravado. He was broadcasting a signal across the world, passing the will of D forward to those who could hear it, absorb it, and act upon it. The will does not honor power. It does not obey titles. It finds carriers in those who respond to truth and liberty rather than wealth or fear. That's why the will of D often manifests in the most unlikely places, in people who appear unconnected to any lineage of prominence. It is living proof that legacy is more than biology. It is belief, emotion, and choice, encoded in the spirit rather than the genome. The world government has long understood the danger of this invisible inheritance. They do not fear swords, fleets, or even devil fruits. They fear the unnamed carriers, the ones whose names are not written in history books, whose power cannot be measured in bounties or armies, yet whose mere existence challenges the order of things. A child born with D in their name, isolated and unheard, is powerless. A person who chooses against all odds to confront injustice in the right moment becomes a weapon far beyond conventional control. It is this very unpredictability that has driven centuries of suppression, propaganda, and manipulation. History has been rewritten repeatedly to obscure the will of D, to bury it beneath myths, legends, and half-truths. But no matter how carefully they cover it, it refuses to die. And each emergence carries the same pattern: laughter in the face of oppression, defiance in the shadow of death, and an unstoppable drive toward freedom. Roger embodied this contradiction more than anyone else. He carried the will of D not only in name, but in action, philosophy, and spirit. He laughed when the world expected fear. He defied when the world expected obedience. He faced death with a calm that was both terrifying and magnetic, ensuring that those who understood what he represented would inherit not a kingdom, a treasure, or a crown, but a choice. A freedom that could not be contained, calculated, or extinguished. And in that laughter, that defiance, and that final act upon the execution platform, he transmitted the will of D across generations, unconstrained by blood, geography, or time itself. In Roger, the world saw not a king, but a signal, a living transmission of rebellion that would echo until the world was ready to receive it. The world remembers Gol D. Roger's execution as a moment of triumph for the Marines, a pirate king finally brought to justice, a dangerous force removed from the stage of history. But what the world failed to see, and what many scholars and pirates still overlook, is that his death was never a defeat. It was a calculated act, a carefully orchestrated trigger designed to set events in motion. Roger didn't die because he lost. He died because he needed to ensure the future unfolded in a very specific way. The execution platform wasn't a stage of shame. It was a beacon, a signal to the world that the era of old powers was over and that a new age was about to begin. His death wasn't an end. It was the ignition of a chain reaction that centuries of secrecy and manipulation could not prevent. The execution amplified Roger's will rather than extinguishing it. By publicly facing the ultimate punishment, he broadcasted the will of D across the globe. His laughter, his calm in the face of death, sent a message that transcended the simple act of defiance. It became a living echo, one that could reach those attuned to the same frequency of freedom and courage. His actions ensured that those who were capable of carrying the will forward would not just inherit a name, they would inherit the momentum to act. This is why the world trembled at his death. Not because he was gone, but because the event transmitted a pulse that could not be blocked. Ships sailed, pirates set course, legends ignited. The execution was a catalyst, transforming a single man's defiance into a global movement that no fleet or government could contain. Roger's pattern repeats across history. Look at Oden Kozuki, executed decades later under similar circumstances. Oden's death wasn't merely a punishment for rebellion. It became a spark for the survival of Wano, the awakening of allies, and the eventual guidance of those capable of continuing the fight. And today, Luffy stands as the latest in this cycle, encountering threats and near-death experiences that mirror his predecessors. Each execution stand becomes a proving ground, a moment where sacrifice is translated into transmission. It is a recurring design. Death is never truly final. It is a relay baton passed from one carrier of the will of D to the next, each inheriting not only the knowledge of past failures, but the energy to challenge the world again. The pattern is deliberate, almost mechanical, and it underlines a truth too few recognize. The most powerful events are not the victories, but the moments designed to make legacies endure. And yet, if Roger represents the spark, the ignition of the will, then the world also requires a counterbalance. Every force has its opposite, and the one who embodies corruption, delay, and manipulation operates under the same rules, but in reverse. Where Roger's execution inspires defiance and freedom, the dark counterpart seeks to control, to suppress, and to bend the world to a static order. Understanding this polarity is essential. Without it, Roger's death appears heroic but meaningless. With it, we see a deeper narrative. The will of D cannot exist in isolation. It needs both the spark and the shadow to define its path. And in that shadow, we find the figure whose influence continues to obstruct the ultimate awakening, a being whose presence turns potential into delay, and whose opposition ensures that Laughtale will not reveal its secrets until the world and its inheritors are truly ready. It's tempting to frame Blackbeard as Luffy's opposite, the dark mirror to a sunlit hero. That's what most people do. One is loud, charismatic, and driven by bonds. The other is secretive, manipulative, and driven by ambition. But that's an oversimplification. In reality, Blackbeard is less an opposite and more a shadow, a parallel path reflecting the same fundamental principle through a distorted lens. Both men are carriers of freedom. Both act according to their own rules, and both pursue their goals with relentless persistence. The difference isn't in the principle itself, it's in the method, the philosophy, and the degree to which each is willing to bend morality to achieve it. Luffy creates through freedom. Blackbeard destroys through it. And that distinction transforms the way we understand their conflict. Freedom manifests differently in their worlds. Luffy's liberty is inclusive. It spreads, attracts, and empowers others. Every ally, every friendship, every bond he forges reinforces the very power that allows him to survive impossible odds. Blackbeard, on the other hand, treats freedom as an extractable resource. He takes, manipulates, and consumes the opportunities around him without regard for those who depend on them. He embodies the shadow of choice. Where Luffy inspires, Blackbeard coerces. Where Luffy elevates, Blackbeard nullifies. Yet underneath this apparent opposition lies a shared understanding of a truth few others grasp. Both men recognize the structure of the world, the limits imposed by history, geography, and government. Both know that to challenge it effectively, you must bend the rules rather than obey them. The parallel isn't accidental, it's evolutionary. One thrives by embracing bonds, the other by exploiting gaps in the system. Thematically, this creates a stark contrast between creation and destruction. Luffy builds alliances, movements, hope. Blackbeard tears down alliances, towns, entire islands. But in their differences, there is also a reflection. Every step Luffy takes toward creating a free world, Blackbeard shadows with the potential for collapse, for corruption, for chaos. He embodies the consequences of freedom taken too far, wielded without conscience. And yet, Blackbeard understands the mechanics of the world with a precision that Luffy, in his impulsiveness, cannot. He reads systems, notices timing, and leverages the world's hidden currents in ways that echo, though distort, Luffy's own intuitive understanding of people, places, and power. This is why Blackbeard has been able to climb so quickly, where others stumble. The shadow doesn't just mimic, it anticipates. And that anticipation starts with something deeply, fundamentally wrong about his body. Unlike any other human, Blackbeard can wield multiple devil fruits, violating rules that govern life itself. His physiology is unstable, capable of holding contradictions that no natural system should allow. That anomaly is not just a personal advantage, it's symbolic. It reflects the broader philosophy he embodies, a willingness to break natural laws, to exploit gaps, and to become an irregularity in a world that otherwise demands conformity. Luffy's freedom is radiant and human. Blackbeard's is warped, engineered, and shadowed. And because he understands the mechanics of the shadow, he doesn't merely act. He waits, calculates, and positions himself as a dark counterpoint to the light. In that sense, he is more than a rival. He is a reflection of what freedom can become when it's untethered from conscience, a shadow that follows Luffy's path, threatening to eclipse it if left unchecked. The most unsettling truth about Blackbeard isn't his ambition, his cruelty, or even his ability to wield two devil fruits. It's something far more fundamental. He was never just one person. The clues have been scattered across the story, subtle yet consistent. His body defies every known law of physiology. He can carry two devil fruits without his cells combusting, a feat impossible for any other human. His responses to pain, injury, and exhaustion are abnormal, almost mechanical. He sleeps irregularly, sometimes surviving extended periods of inactivity without consequences, and emerges from chaos in ways that suggest multiple internal processes running simultaneously. These aren't anomalies. They're symptoms of a deeper reality, that Blackbeard's body is more than a singular entity. It is a vessel, a shell capable of containing multiple wills, multiple consciousnesses, perhaps even multiple souls. The mechanics of his uniqueness explain what otherwise seems impossible. Devil fruits are not mere powers, they are forces with rules. Eat one, and your body conforms to its logic. Eat two, and the vessel fails. Blackbeard doesn't fail. He thrives. That suggests he is not a unified subject in the way normal humans are. Inside him, there may be compartmentalization, separate identities coexisting, each capable of commanding a fragment of the body, and each manipulating the devil fruits in ways that a single consciousness could not. This internal division could account for his resilience under extreme pain and his uncanny capacity to strategize while sustaining injuries that would incapacitate anyone else. Sleep is fragmented, death is deflected, and yet he endures. The fragmentation of self becomes a literal survival advantage, a dark inversion of Luffy's unity of body, mind, and spirit. Even the darkness that surrounds him hints at something unnatural. Blackbeard's presence carries a gravitational weight, not metaphorical, but almost physical in narrative terms. He seems to pull events, people, and chaos toward him as if he were a center of internal gravity. That gravity is not only symbolic, it is expressed in his interactions with his environment and devil fruits. Darkness and void-like qualities appear around him, as though multiple identities inside him generate an uneven force, a mass of conflicting wills that produces a singular effect in the world. Pain, sleep, and shadow coalesce into a weaponized anomaly, making him not just a pirate, but a walking paradox, human enough to act, strange enough to break rules that govern all other humans. In this way, Blackbeard is less a man and more a system, an organism engineered by fate, ambition, and perhaps forces older than the current age. This internal complexity ties him directly to ghosts the world has tried desperately to forget. The connection to figures like Xebec, the man whose body, crew, and will he seemingly inherited, is far more than a historical coincidence. If Blackbeard contains fragments of other souls, memories, or even the will of the dead, then every step he takes is the continuation of unfinished business stretching back decades, possibly centuries. He doesn't just wield power, he embodies the consequences of inheritance in its most perverse form. Where Luffy inherits hope, courage, and defiance, Blackbeard inherits darkness, cunning, and destruction. And in doing so, he becomes a living link between the present and ghosts who were never allowed a proper end. Every action he takes is a reminder that some legacies refuse peace, some wills refuse burial. And in this way, Blackbeard is not merely a threat to individuals or nations. He is a walking reminder of what the world has tried and failed to forget. The event at God Valley has long been framed as a closed chapter, a battle frozen in legend where pirates and marines clashed and one man's legacy was supposedly extinguished. But that interpretation misses the hidden truth. God Valley was not an ending. It was an unfinished event, a fracture in history, leaving echoes that reverberate centuries later. Most see the death of Rox D. Xebec as definitive, a conclusion to his dangerous ideology. Yet the reality is far darker. The outcome of God Valley did not erase Xebec's influence. It merely paused it. His will, his philosophy, and his ambition did not vanish with his body. Instead, they found a vessel, a conduit capable of continuing the work that the world assumed had died alongside him. That vessel is Blackbeard. Blackbeard's rise cannot be separated from the shadow of God Valley. Everything he does, every strategic choice, every methodical accumulation of power carries fingerprints of Xebec's ideology. Unlike other pirates who act on instinct or opportunity, Blackbeard operates with precision, patience, and a long-term vision that mirrors Xebec's approach. The parallels are too significant to be a coincidence. And yet, this is not mentorship. There was no teacher-student relationship, no conscious guidance from the past. Blackbeard did not study Xebec to learn a style or philosophy. He inherited it. Memory, ideology, and ambition were somehow transmitted, either biologically, spiritually, or through some anomaly in the laws of the world. When Blackbeard acts, he does so with the conviction of a man who is not alone in his decisions, who carries a history that continues to live inside him. He is less a student than a vessel, less a successor than a continuation. This inheritance changes the way we view Blackbeard entirely. He is not merely ambitious. He is a living echo of history that refuses to die quietly. God Valley was intended to resolve conflict, to remove danger, to close the chapter of Xebec's threat. But the story didn't end. History was never meant to forgive. The ideology, strategy, and destructive potential of Xebec persisted through Blackbeard, giving him a foundation no ordinary pirate could have achieved. Every alliance he forms, every devil fruit he acquires, every calculated act of violence or deception becomes a reflection of a will that predates the modern world order. He doesn't create his own path. He continues an old one, advancing it with a precision and patience only possible because he carries more than just ambition. He carries history itself. And yet, even this terrifying continuity reveals a critical insight. Power alone was never the ultimate weapon. Blackbeard's inherited will gives him reach and understanding, but it is not what truly defines him. Knowledge of history, the ability to manipulate timing, and the possession of a body capable of anomalies all amplify him. But they do not replace the intangible force that drives the world forward. What made Xebec dangerous, and what makes Blackbeard a perpetual threat, is that their wills align with the currents of the world in a way that ordinary rulers, armies, and weapons cannot anticipate. They operate on a level that transcends brute strength. And in Blackbeard, we see the convergence of inherited ideology, unnatural physiology, and an understanding of systems so precise that the world itself becomes a stage for the continuation of a plan never completed at God Valley. When most fans hear about ancient technology in One Piece, their minds immediately jump to weapons. Pluton, Poseidon, Uranus. Massive, destructive, capable of leveling islands and nations. And yet, those weapons, terrifying as they are, may have been the least dangerous creations of the ancient world. Buried in the histories of long-forgotten civilizations lie technologies far subtler, far more insidious, and far more difficult to counter. Automators, systems, and constructs that operated without emotion, without empathy, and without mercy. These weren't just machines. They were mechanisms of control, automated networks, cities capable of independent function, and even celestial devices designed to manipulate environmental conditions on a planetary scale. Unlike a cannon or a bomb, these creations did not announce themselves. They quietly maintained order, or enforced it, long after their creators disappeared. Take Enel, for example, and his technologically augmented society in Skypiea. At first glance, he appears as a man of godlike power, wielding lightning and ruling a floating island with divine arrogance. But beneath that, his civilization depended entirely on technology. Automated defense systems, atmospheric manipulation, and pre-programmed hierarchies. Skypiea itself was a demonstration of the danger posed by machines divorced from morality. Similarly, the moon city Burka, though abandoned, hints at a civilization capable of surviving beyond the constraints of Earth, of operating under conditions no organic life could sustain. These are not mere extensions of human capability. They are self-perpetuating structures, systems that can outlast their creators and impose order on a scale that no individual, army, or nation could match. In effect, they create a world where human agency is optional, where natural chaos is subordinated to programmed logic. The threat of ancient technology lies in its emotionless precision. It does not waver, hesitate, or question the morality of its actions. Weapons like Pluton can be destroyed, Poseidon can be bound, and Uranus may be neutralized. But a self-sustaining technological system does not require maintenance in the conventional sense. It adjusts, corrects, and survives according to pre-programmed rules, often hidden from those who live under its influence. Organic life, in contrast, is unpredictable, creative, and chaotic. Pirates, Marines, and governments alike operate under error, hesitation, and moral conflict. The ancients, by contrast, designed mechanisms that were immune to such limitations. They created continuity, stability, and sometimes tyranny, without relying on human fallibility. In this sense, they wielded a form of power that dwarfs even the most legendary weapons. And that is precisely why Haki exists. The powers we see characters like Luffy, Rayleigh, and other warriors wield are not just tools for combat. They are fundamentally a countermeasure to an ordered mechanical universe. Observation. Haki allows perception beyond what is programmed or controlled. Armament Haki enables adaptation against forces that are otherwise unstoppable. Conqueror's Haki asserts will over systems, projecting emotion and intention in a way machines cannot interpret or resist. Haki introduces chaos into a world designed to be orderly. It is proof that the greatest defense against the ancient civilization's tools is not brute strength, nor even the destructive potential of a devil fruit, but the organic, unpredictable force of human spirit and emotion. In a world where ancient technology could outlast civilizations, Haki ensures that human choice, creativity, and chaos continue to matter, and that freedom remains more than a memory of the past. Haki has long been presented as a mysterious force in One Piece, a superpower rivaling even the most potent devil fruits. But at its core, Haki is not a weapon. It is the world itself asserting resistance against control. It is the physical manifestation of living, thinking beings rejecting the artificial order imposed by oppressors, governments, or even ancient technology. Observation Haki allows its user to perceive hidden truths, sense intent, and anticipate actions that no device, devil fruit, or calculation could predict. Armament Haki hardens the body, not merely to resist attacks, but to embody the resilience of spirit against forces designed to dominate. Conqueror's Haki, rare and terrifying, is the purest example of this resistance. The ability to project willpower so intensely that it can bend the environment and living beings to the inherent chaos of choice. Haki is not about fighting. It is about rejecting domination, whether imposed by history, government, or unnatural power. Where devil fruits provide abilities, Haki provides autonomy. A devil fruit may grant fire, invisibility, or the ability to manipulate space, but it is inherently a tool. Its limits are defined, its rules are rigid, and its effects can often be countered by another fruit or technology. Haki, on the other hand, transcends those rules. It is not a learned skill in the traditional sense, nor is it bound by physics or biology in the ways that devil fruits are. It interacts with the world at a level beyond the physical, channeling intention, emotion, and the flow of life itself. Luffy's mastery of Haki allows him to manipulate outcomes in ways that no devil fruit could accomplish alone, and it is precisely why the most potent fruit users still rely on Haki to truly dominate or survive. In essence, Haki exists because the world refuses to be fully tamed, an echo of natural chaos, resisting artificial structure at every turn. This principle becomes even more apparent when considering Gear 5. Luffy's ultimate transformation is not merely a display of raw power or the awakening of a devil fruit. It is the synthesis of every aspect of Haki with the awakened potential of his devil fruit. Observation, armament, and Conqueror's Haki converge, amplifying not just strength, but freedom itself. Gear 5 is a manifestation of the world agreeing to participate, of nature bending to the will of a carrier capable of harmonizing with it. Unlike a simple weapon or ability, it operates as a collaboration between Luffy's spirit and the world's inherent forces. This is why, despite appearances of overwhelming strength, Gear 5 is not about domination. It is about alignment, permission, and resonance. Luffy does not merely act upon the world acts with him. And that is the true meaning behind Gear 5 being more than power. It is permission granted by the world itself, the ultimate acknowledgement that freedom, chaos, and organic life can triumph over imposed order. Every punch, stretch, and transformation is less a physical act and more a cosmic contract. The world permits action that respects its natural flow, rejects domination, and honors the balance between human will and natural law. In this sense, Gear 5 is the clearest evidence that Haki is not simply a tool. It is the world speaking back to those who try to impose control, an affirmation that no matter how potent the technology, devil fruit, or tyrant, the spirit of life cannot be fully constrained. Haki, at its deepest level, is the refusal of the world to obey, and Gear 5 is the moment that refusal grants license to those who embody it fully. Gear 5 is not merely a power. It is the world itself answering a question, granting permission for a single individual to embody freedom in its purest, most unrestrained form. When Luffy taps into this form, he ceases to be just a man and becomes a conduit for something far larger, the energy of life, chaos, and liberation itself. That energy has a name whispered through myth and history: Nika. Nika is not just a deity, a symbol, or a power. Nika is liberation incarnate. Luffy doesn't simply awaken his devil fruit. He awakens a principle that the world has been ready to release for centuries, a principle that stretches across oceans, history, and the very fabric of reality. When Gear 5 manifests, reality itself bends, reshapes, and cooperates, because the world recognizes that the moment is right for freedom to flourish. The effects of Gear 5 are surreal, absurd, and yet profoundly symbolic. Buildings stretch, enemies bounce, and landscapes warp around Luffy's movements, not because he wills it alone, but because the world itself participates in the act. This is not cartoonish exaggeration.
It is the literal expression of cosmic consent. The world is saying yes to laughter, yes to absurdity, and yes to the disruption of imposed rules. Every action, every stretch of limb, and every exaggerated gesture becomes a message to the universe. Freedom is not merely allowed, it is inevitable when it aligns with the flow of life. Gear 5 is the embodiment of the idea that the world responds to belief, conviction, and the energy of will. When Luffy laughs in this state, it is not just mirth, it is resonance, a sound that carries across space, striking at the very chains of gravity, oppression, and stagnation. This liberation stands in sharp contrast to Blackbeard's philosophy. Where Luffy bends reality through affirmation, Blackbeard bends reality through denial. Gravity, void, and suppression define his presence. He imposes inertia where Luffy seeks motion. He extinguishes chaos where Luffy celebrates it. In a world that refuses to fully obey, Blackbeard attempts to enforce static order, creating opposition that is both physical and philosophical. The clash is not only about power, it is about the relationship between life and control, between freedom and the forces that deny it. Gear 5 demonstrates what happens when life answers affirmatively to those who embody freedom, while Blackbeard represents the shadows of refusal, of a world artificially constrained by the inertia of will denied. One moves with the flow, the other attempts to freeze it. Yet even with this mythic elevation, the world's consent is not permanent, nor unconditional. Gear 5 is a temporary symphony, a cosmic acknowledgement of Luffy's alignment with life, spirit, and history. But it is also a test. The currents of fate, the cycles of Laughtale, and the latent power of opposing forces like Blackbeard and Emu all challenge that freedom, probing its limits and pushing it to extremes. The laughter, the absurdity, and the chaos are part of a larger dialogue with the world itself, a negotiation between liberation and reality. Gear 5 is not simply a statement of power. It is a confirmation that the world is willing to move just for a moment in concert with freedom. And that moment, dazzling as it is only the beginning. The world is watching, measuring, and testing, and the true impact of such freedom has yet to fully unfold. Elbaf is more than just a land of giants. It is a crucible, a place where history, ideology, and the human, or rather the giant, spirit converge. From the earliest teasers, the island has been presented as a site of legend, yet its true purpose stretches far beyond any single arc or adventure. Elbaf is designed as a turning point, a philosophical battleground as much as a physical one. The giants themselves are not mere brutes or comic relief. They are living repositories of memory and culture, keepers of ancient truths that bridge the mortal world and the divine. Their society embodies lessons about honor, justice, and the consequences of action, creating a mirror in which the Straw Hats can confront the weight of their own legacies. This is why their interactions on the island will resonate far beyond the immediate conflict. Elbaf is a pivot where the choices of today echo into the shaping of tomorrow. The giants of Elbaf are closely tied to history and myth, often evoking figures who were once worshipped as gods. Their existence, culture, and memories preserve fragments of forgotten events, some of which may link directly to the Void Century, Joy Boy, and the legacy of the ancient kingdom. They are more than warriors. They are historians, living testaments to cycles of sacrifice, battle, and survival. And their connection to gods is not merely symbolic. Within Norse mythology, giants often represent primal forces, the collision of natural law and divine will. One Piece borrows these archetypes not as decorative nods, but as structural anchors for the story's deeper themes: the tension between freedom and control, the cyclical nature of history, and the ultimate consequences of rebellion. Every giant that Luffy and his crew encounter carries echoes of these ideas, each interaction a subtle preparation for the events that will define the final acts of the series. Usopp's dream, often framed as whimsical or humorous, becomes strikingly relevant in this context. His aspiration to become a brave warrior and to have his tales immortalized is not just personal ambition. It is a metaphorical bridge between human imagination and the lessons encoded in Elbaf's history. Giants, who live in the tension between memory and action, recognize the value of stories and legend. Usopp's storytelling ability mirrors the function of the giants themselves: to transmit knowledge, inspire courage, and challenge conventional hierarchies. When his dream intersects with the giant's legacy, it is not just comic relief. It becomes a narrative device that reinforces One Piece's recurring theme: the power of influence, memory, and narrative to shape the course of events. Usopp is small by size, but enormous by potential. And in Elbaf, that potential will collide with forces far older and wiser than any human imagination could predict. And at the heart of Elbaf lies something green. It is a symbol, a literal and figurative seed, representing hope, renewal, and legacy. The green of Elbaf is not just flora. It is a manifestation of what the Straw Hats seek on every adventure: continuity, growth, and a chance to carry lessons forward. Elbaf's forests, its culture, and its treasures are tied to the ongoing themes of history, memory, and the cycles of human and giant struggle. It is a pivotal location that promises not only battles and power-ups, but also reflection, philosophical confrontation, and preparation for the world's ultimate conflicts. Here, the themes of freedom, inheritance, and resistance converge, foreshadowing the Straw Hats' next steps as they move closer to Laughtale and the culmination of centuries of hidden history. In short, Elbaf is not just another island. It is the moment where the Straw Hats' journey shifts from adventure to inevitability, a turning point carefully designed to resonate with every aspect of One Piece's mythic architecture. The Emerald City has long been teased in whispers, a place of dazzling beauty, power, and mystery. On the surface, it appears as a utopia, a perfect culmination of ambition and desire, yet the symbolism embedded within its name tells a very different story. Emerald is a gemstone that reflects light, refracts it, and amplifies its brilliance, but it can also blind, deceive, and distort perception. The city, much like the gem, is not merely a location. It is an idea, a mirror that reflects what the observer wants to see while concealing what actually lies beneath. In this sense, the Emerald City functions as a philosophical test, forcing those who enter to confront not just physical obstacles, but the disparity between expectation and reality. Its beauty is compelling, but its truth is far more elusive, hinting at secrets layered under glamour, illusion, and calculated spectacle. This is where the contrast between illusion and truth becomes central. The world often mistakes grandeur for authenticity, just as it confuses the surface of the Emerald City for its substance. Elbaf's history and treasures may promise inspiration, power, and freedom, yet the world government has a long history of weaponizing perception. By embedding layers of illusion, manipulation, and obfuscation, they control not just the physical world but the mental and emotional landscapes of those who challenge them. The Emerald City, then, is more than a city. It is a test of discernment, a filter to distinguish those capable of seeing through deception from those who can be easily misled. The city's green brilliance is seductive, almost hypnotic. But those who rely solely on perception rather than understanding risk losing sight of the ultimate truths hidden within. The illusions of Emerald City mirror broader themes in the world of One Piece. Just as the world government suppresses knowledge of the Void Century, ancient kingdoms, and the Will of D, the city masks realities that are critical to the Straw Hat's ultimate journey. It embodies the idea that the world is willing to present a beautiful lie to obscure dangerous knowledge. Giants, treasure, and powerful artifacts may all exist within its walls, but they may not be what they appear. The city becomes a microcosm for the world itself, a place where perception, ambition, and greed can be manipulated, and where truth is rarely accessible without careful observation, courage, and the willingness to question what seems obvious. It is not simply a physical space. It is a mental and ideological gauntlet, preparing the Straw Hats for the complexities of Laughtale and the revelations of history yet to come. Which leaves one final question. How much of the world we see is shaped by deliberate deception? If the Emerald City, a place of legend and awe, can conceal falsehoods beneath its brilliance, what else is hidden from view? What truths has the world government buried so deeply that even the most diligent observers might mistake lies for reality? The city's beauty is not only a trap, it is a reflection of the systemic illusions that govern the One Piece world. For the Straw Hats, navigating its secrets is not just a challenge of power or skill. It is a test of perception, judgment, and resilience. The answers they uncover in the Emerald City will ripple outward, shaping their understanding of freedom, history, and the ultimate legacy they are chasing. And beyond the green light and the glittering towers, a deeper reality waits. A reality that only the brave, the discerning, and the steadfast will survive to see. The war, therefore, is less about who strikes the hardest or commands the largest fleet, and more about who can transmit truth most effectively. Every participant in the final battle is a vector of memory. Luffy carries the Will of D, the culmination of Joy Boy's dream, and the embodiment of freedom and defiance. Blackbeard carries the fragmented shadows of Zebek and the legacy of darkness and control. Even the nations, the giants of Elbaf, and the remnants of ancient civilizations serve as repositories of knowledge waiting for the world to notice and remember. Laughtale itself acts as both stage and amplifier, ensuring that the events transpiring there will broadcast far beyond the island, resonating through the currents, the seas, and the hearts of every observer. In this way, the final war becomes a contest not merely of destruction, but of remembrance, ensuring that the truths of the past cannot be suppressed any longer. And that brings us back to the laugh. Gol D. Rogers' iconic, seemingly whimsical laughter at the end of his journey was never frivolous. It was anticipatory, a signal that the stage was set. He knew, perhaps more than anyone, that the culmination of history, freedom, and truth could not be stopped. His laughter was not for amusement. It was the acknowledgement that memory cannot be constrained, that the final story was waiting to unfold, and that those attuned to it would inherit the responsibility to ensure the world remembers. The laugh is both a warning and a promise that power alone cannot dictate the outcome of history, but memory, once awakened, is unstoppable. In the final war, when swords clash, seas roil, and islands tremble, it will be the echoes of laughter, of freedom, defiance, and truth that dictate the course of the world. The battle is not over gold, not over dominion. It is over what is remembered and who will live to tell the tale. Roger's laugh has always been a mystery, framed in history as a personal quirk or a pirate's defiance in the face of death. But with the layers of truth now unfolding, that laughter takes on an entirely new significance. It was never just his own reaction. It was a signal, a ripple in the currents of the world, an acknowledgement that the hidden histories, the Void Century, and the legacies of Joy Boy and the Will of D were all aligned for a moment of revelation. The laugh was the sound of inevitability, of freedom's return, and the acknowledgement that the world itself was on the verge of responding. If Roger laughed because the world was ready, or because it could not help but respond, then the question emerges: what happens when the world actually laughs back? Can the systems of control, the governments, and the institutions built over centuries survive the resonance of truth and defiance amplified on a global scale? The concept of the world laughing back is not metaphorical. It is a philosophical and narrative consequence of the Straw Hats' journey. Every island they liberate, every story they uncover, and every heart they inspire contribute to a rising chorus of awareness. Freedom, once contained, begins to propagate like an unstoppable wave. Luffy's laughter in Gear 5, the chaos of Elbaf, the awakening of the Emerald City, even the subtle echoes in the Dragon Stream. These are all instances where the world begins to respond in kind. To laugh back is to acknowledge defiance, to resist imposed order, and to reclaim the narrative from centuries of erasure. It is the literal and symbolic manifestation of collective memory, activating across oceans, societies, and hearts. If Laughtale is the final broadcast point, then Roger's laugh becomes the initial signal in a chain reaction, and the world's response becomes a force of liberation that no devil fruit, no weapon, and no government could anticipate. Yet this raises an unsettling dilemma. Can the world survive its own awakening? The truth, hidden for centuries, if unleashed fully, could shatter structures, alliances, and beliefs upon which nations and empires have relied. It is not merely a question of political power or military might. It is about the collapse of control itself. Entire societies might face the revelation that their histories, their heroes, and even their moral certainties were fabricated, distorted, or suppressed. And in that collapse lies both terror and promise. The world may tremble, economies may falter, and leaders may fall, but the underlying principle is irrepressible. Freedom, knowledge, and the will of D are contagious. Once the first ripple spreads, it cannot be reversed. Roger laughed, knowing this, and Luffy, inheriting that will, now tests the limits of that contagion, seeing just how far it can reach before the world and its oppressors are forced to confront what they have long denied. And yet, even as this moment approaches, the story refuses resolution. The world laughing back is not a certainty, nor is its outcome predictable. It is a question left open, a philosophical cliffhanger. Will freedom spread in harmony, or will the revelation of truth create chaos? Will laughter unite nations, or will it ignite resistance in unexpected corners? What is clear is that the narrative is no longer contained within islands, seas, or even individuals. It is global, systemic, and almost alive. Roger's laugh was the first spark. Luffy's journey is the accelerant. And somewhere beyond Laughtale, beyond the currents, and beyond the eyes of governments and kings, the world itself teeters on the brink of a response that could redefine existence itself. Whether that response will be harmony, destruction, or something beyond comprehension remains unresolved. But one thing is certain: when the world finally laughs back, nothing will ever be the same again. The journey of One Piece, from the first waves at Fuchsia Village to the distant currents surrounding Laughtale, has always hinted that the ultimate goal is not a simple treasure, nor a reward to be held or displayed. What the series truly charts is a cycle of inheritance, struggle, and choice, a repeating pattern where each generation carries the echoes, burdens, and dreams of those who came before. From Joy Boy to Roger, from Odin to Luffy, the treasure has never been gold or jewels, but the knowledge, courage, and freedom passed across time. The oceans, islands, and skies are not merely settings. They are stages for the passing of will, for the testing of character, and for the propagation of ideals. Every obstacle, every laugh, and every seemingly trivial adventure is a lesson, a fragment of guidance to prepare those who would face the final revelation. Cycles define the One Piece world. Laughtale's appearance every 800 years, the Dragon Stream's 2,000-year orbit, and the rise and fall of nations all reinforce the notion that history repeats, adapts, and teaches. Each iteration carries consequences from the last, and each inheritor of the will of D confronts a world shaped by decisions they did not make, but must now navigate. These cycles are not deterministic. They are invitations. The past sets the stage, but the future is still open. In this sense, One Piece has never been a story about victory in the conventional sense. It is about the courage to step into the currents of history, to carry inherited will responsibly, and to decide what to leave behind for those who follow. The true treasure is not the end point, but the act of engaging with the cycle itself, of testing freedom against order, and of choosing to act even when the consequences remain uncertain. Inheritance in One Piece is both a gift and a responsibility. The will of D, the echoes of Joy Boy, and the memories preserved in giants, whales, and cities all demonstrate that life is a continuum, and that freedom, knowledge, and defiance are never truly individual. Luffy, Roger, and their predecessors are conduits, vessels who allow these forces to manifest in the world, but they are not the originators. The story emphasizes that the value of power, knowledge, or even legacy lies not in possession but in transmission. Choices matter because they determine what is remembered, what is preserved, and what is allowed to ripple into the lives of those yet to come. To claim One Piece as a personal reward would miss the point entirely. It is not about ownership, but about alignment with the currents of history, understanding the lessons embedded in the past and ensuring that freedom continues to flow in the world without obstruction. Ultimately, One Piece may not conclude with a simple victory, a final battle won, or a treasure held aloft. It concludes with release, the release of the world from ignorance, the release of truth from suppression, and the release of those who dare to laugh in defiance. But with this liberation comes a question that lingers long after the story ends. Does humanity deserve such freedom? Will the world, once confronted with the full knowledge of its history, honor it wisely, or will it stumble under the weight of its own awakening? The narrative leaves us suspended in this ambiguity, reflecting the series' core themes. Freedom is precious precisely because it is difficult to earn. History is powerful because it shapes perception, and true treasure is measured not in gold, but in the courage to face the truth and the willingness to pass it forward. One Piece, in the end, is a meditation on inheritance, choice, and the relentless pursuit of a world willing to remember, and perhaps, just perhaps, to laugh back, to laugh